The most eagerly awaited endorsement in this presidential race happened just before the storm, right? That was Colin Powell.
Good morning, Charlie. Good morning, Nora.
Will you endorse President Obama this race?
Well, you know, I voted for him in 2008, and I plan to stick with him in 2012, and I'll be voting for he and for Vice President Joe Biden next month.
That's an endorsement of President Obama for re-election.
Yes, and let me say why. When he took over, the country was in very, very difficult straits. We were in one of the worst recessions we had seen in recent times, close to a depression. The fiscal system was collapsing. Wall Street was in chaos. We had 800,000 jobs lost in that first month of the Obama administration, and unemployment would peak a few months later at 10%. So we were in real trouble. The auto industry was collapsing. The housing industry was starting to collapse, and we were in very difficult straits. And I saw over the next several years stabilization come back in the financial community. Housing is now starting to pick up after 4 years. It's starting to pick up. Consumer confidence is rising. And so I think generally we've come out of the dive and we're starting to gain altitude. It doesn't mean we are problem solved. There are lots of problems still out there. The unemployment rate is too high. People are still hurting in housing. But I see that we are starting to rise up. I also saw the president get us out of one war, start to get us out of a second war, and did not get us into any new wars. And finally, I think that the actions he has taken with respect to protecting us from terrorism have been very, very solid. And so I think we ought to keep on the track that we are on. With respect to Governor Romney, I have the utmost respect for him, but as I listen to what his proposals are, especially with respect to dealing with our most significant issue, the economy, it's essentially let's cut taxes and compensate for that with other things. But that compensation does not cover all of the cuts intended or the new expenses associated with defense.
You said you have listened to Governor Romney. Have you talked to Governor Romney about this? Did you give him an early notice that you plan to endorse the president again?
No, I didn't give anybody an early notice. I have spoken to Governor Romney. We had a very good conversation a few weeks back.
Did he ask you for an endorsement of him back then?
No.
And have you spoken with President Obama?
I speak to the president on a regular basis, and he didn't ask either. This is my decision based on my looking at it as a citizen. I think this is an exciting race between two very, very capable men, and I signed on for a long patrol with President Obama, and I don't think this is the time to make such a sudden change. And not only am I not comfortable with what Governor Romney is proposing for his economic plan, I have concerns about his views in foreign policy. The governor who was speaking on Monday night at the debate was saying things that were quite different than what he said earlier. So I'm not quite sure which Governor Romney we would be getting with respect to foreign policy.
What concerns do you have about Governor Romney's foreign policy?
Well, it's hard to fix it. I mean, it's a moving target. One day he has a certain strong view about staying in Afghanistan, but then on Monday night he agrees with the withdrawal. Same thing in Iraq. On almost every issue that was discussed on Monday night, Governor Romney agreed with the president with some nuances. But this is quite a different set of foreign policy views than he had earlier in the campaign. And my concern, which I've expressed previously in a public way, is that sometimes I don't sense that he has thought through these issues as thoroughly as he should have, and he gets advice from his campaign staff that he then has to adjust or modify as he goes along.
Are you concerned about the people that are advising Governor Romney?
I think there are some very, very strong neoconservative views that are presented by the governor that I have some trouble with. There are other issues as well, not just the economy and foreign policy. I'm more comfortable with President Obama and his administration when it comes to issues like what are we going to do about climate? What are we going to do about immigration? What are we going to do about education? Lots of things like that. I do not want to see the new Obamacare plan thrown off the table. It has issues. You have to fix some things in that plan. But what I see when I look at that plan is 30 million of our fellow citizens will now be covered by insurance. And I think that's good. We're one of the few nations in the world with our size and population and wealth that does not have universal health care. I think the president has started with the plan he issued yesterday and some interviews he's given that he's going to focus on the economy, he's going to focus on debt. We can argue whether he should focus on debt and jobs, but they're all interlinked. I think the major problem faced either by Governor Romney or President Obama, whoever should win the election, is going to be what to do about the fiscal cliff we're about to fly over. You know, this is something that was put in place by Congress. And while we're talking about the two candidates for president, let's not forget that Congress bears a lot of the responsibility for many of the problems that we have now. They're the ones that write the appropriations bills. They're the ones that pass the legislation for more spending and for the various entitlement programs that people have trouble with. And so I think it's a close race. I think every American should look at both candidates carefully, measure them against your own personal views. I really am pleased the way the president saved the auto industry, and I think that brought a lot of jobs back to Ohio and Michigan and other parts of the Northwest.
So you blame the failure to find a grand bargain on the Congress and not on the president?
The failure to find a grand bargain. Why do we need a grand bargain? Why do we need Simpson Bowles? This is work the Congress is supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to need special committees to come along. We have a Congress of 535 people with dozens and dozens of committees. Why can't they, up on the Hill, start talking to one another, reach across the aisle? But it will take greater presidential leadership. And I think what the president said in one of his remarks yesterday is that he intends to spend more time trying to bring that leadership up to the Hill and get both parties, both sides, to start talking to one another. But every candidate can say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But in reality, it's the Congress that actually does it or doesn't do it. And I don't think the Congress has been meeting its responsibilities.
General, you worked for several Republican presidents. Are you still a Republican?
Yes, I think I'm a Republican of more moderate mold, and that's something of a dying breed, I'm sorry to say. But, you know, the Republicans I worked for are President Reagan, President Bush 41, the Howard Bakers of the world, people who were conservative, people who were willing to push their conservative views, but people who recognize that at the end of the day, you've got to find a basis for compromise.
But then,
compromise is how this country runs.
Are you then saying that you think you may have to leave the Republican Party if it continues in the direction that it's going?
No, I didn't say that at all, Charlie, but nice try. I said I'm a moderate Republican, and there are fewer of us. What party are you in, Charlie?
I'm an independent. General Powell, anytime you want to come and make news, please come here. We love having you here to talk about important issues because of the number of important roles you have served. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Charlie. I'll call you maybe.
A song in your heart, huh?
Yeah. Gail wants you to come back on set so we can all enjoy that. Yeah.
The reason that Colin Powell's was the most eagerly anticipated endorsement of this election was because his endorsement of Barack Obama in 2008 was seen as being a very consequential thing in terms of the Obama lead over McCain in 2008 and how that election was going to turn out. But also, more importantly, Colin Powell is probably the single Republican in the country who has the most gravitas and credibility with crossover voters, with independent voters, and with, generally speaking, non-ideological people who admire his leadership and his judgment. Even after the Iraq War, Colin Powell is the rare figure in American politics who is very famous and widely respected, not seen as being in anybody's pocket, and whose opinion and endorsement, particularly for middle-of-the-road and potentially undecided voters, really does just matter a lot. That is why that endorsement was so highly anticipated. This guy is the only other political figure in America who is anything remotely like that. Michael Bloomberg, New York City's mayor. He is an ex-Republican and an ex-Democrat. He is now an independent. He's in his third term as the highly visible mayor of America's largest city. Before it happened today, nobody expected Michael Bloomberg to make an endorsement at all in this year's presidential race. And that's mostly because he said that he wouldn't. Back in June, Mr. Bloomberg made sure to be overheard telling people at a party in New York City that he intended to remain publicly neutral in this year's presidential race. But then today, he didn't. In the midst of this city's ongoing and complicated and exhausting and heartbreaking and painstaking response to this unprecedented storm, the mayor of New York City published this 17-paragraph endorsement of President Obama. And the fact that nobody knew it was coming and that he said he wouldn't make an endorsement just made it that much more important. as did the fact that it was not at all clear that if he was going to make an endorsement, the guy who he would endorse would be President Obama. I mean, Michael Bloomberg has been critical of President Obama on a number of issues. He, frankly, has personified and personally articulated the sort of Wall Street business critique of Mr. Obama that Mitt Romney has so gleefully capitalized on, literally, in terms of massive support from places like Goldman Sachs and other Wall Street firms. But ultimately, Mayor Bloomberg's endorsement said that when you look at Obama versus Romney on a whole bunch of issues, like education, he mentioned, and choice and marriage equality, and most emphatically, if you look at the fact that he believes in science and does not scoff at the idea of climate change and has taken concrete action to combat it, Mr. Bloomberg said the choice to him is clear. Quote, one sees climate change as an urgent problem that threatens our that threatens our planet. One does not. I want our president to place scientific evidence and risk management above electoral politics. This endorsement criticizes Mitt Romney's leadership, on the other hand, saying, quote, in the past, Mr. Romney has also taken sensible positions, but he has reversed course on all of them and is even running against the health care model he signed into law in Massachusetts. Mike Bloomberg criticizes Mr. Romney specifically for flip-flopping and dropping all his previous positions on climate change, and then says, quote, this issue is too important. We need determined leadership at the national level. In other words, I don't think we're going to get determined leadership from Mitt Romney. I think he has taken occasionally attractive positions, but leadership, no.
Dealer's editorial last Sunday, and this is what it said. The question is, which Romney are voters going to get? Which Romney would they elect? It asks, the rather liberal one who ran for the Senate in '94, the pragmatic governor, the sharply conservative candidate of this year's GOP primaries, the reborn moderate of recent weeks. All politicians change positions over time, but Romney's frequent changes raise question about his core principles and make his lack of policy details all the more troubling. They make you wonder if he would stand up to the more extreme elements in his own party, especially to House Republicans who undercut Ohioan John Boehner's attempts to negotiate a deficit and debt deal. How do you respond to that, Governor?
Look at his record.